I want to tell you about a guy who's already dumbed down your children and virtually the entire American population of children, probably for a generation or two. We were now dumber than ever before, and a big part of the reason is this guy here. He also has more data on you than you can even possibly imagine. He's a totalitarian who's obsessed with reducing the population of humans on this planet, and he wants to inject you and everybody in your family with multiple doses of untested, untried experimental vaccines, supposedly all for your own good. Stay tuned and I'll tell you who we're talking about and why you ought to be very concerned. So, this globalist, he's a technocrat, he's a globalist, he's just obsessed with getting rid of people. And I'm referring to, of course, Microsoft founder and multi-gazillionaire Bill Gates, probably one of the most controversial people in the world right now, and for good reasons. Now, I'm going to go through a lot of what Gates is about and realize we're only scratching the surface here. But this guy, you start by looking at what he says. It's creepy beyond what you can imagine. You start looking who he is involved with. Creepy beyond what you can imagine. He's very closely connected to the mass murdering dictatorship in China, very closely connected to the Western elites, the deep state, of course. He regularly goes to Bilderberg. He is like this with all the criminals and terrorists and gangsters and technocrats running the UN agencies, especially Dr. Tedros, who we've talked about before on this program, an actual member of the Politburo of an ethno-Marxist terrorist organization from Ethiopia, famous for human rights abuses, trying to exterminate whole people groups, and he's not even a medical doctor. So this is he calls Bill Gates his brother. Isn't that cute? Also connected to the Council on Foreign Relations. Go back and watch our episode. And of course, he has to be connected to the child trafficking, child raping pedophile Jeffrey Epstein, who obviously did not commit suicide. Right. Now, with all these connections and with all the time that he's spending on television, right? Hey, you can't even turn on TV anymore without seeing this guy lecturing us about vaccines, this, and health, that, and response, this. You might be forgiven for thinking that this guy is already the emperor of the world. Well, if we're not careful, he is going to end up in that spot. And our liberty, our health freedom, our families, our self government, even much of the human population are going to be in mortal danger. Now, if you've been listening, Gates has been telling us over and over and over again that nothing is going to go back to normal. Nothing can ever go back to normal until everybody on the planet gets vaccinated.
Things won't go back to truly normal until we have a vaccine that we've gotten out to basically the entire world.
Okay, and you're probably thinking, wow, that guy is absolutely positively crazy. I'm never going to be taking his idiotic vaccine. Thank you very much. Well, if only if it were that simple. And we'll come back to his vaccine obsession soon. But I want to give you some insight into how powerful this guy is, how easily he's able to get his way. He's got at least $100 billion, depending on the day and depending on where he's stashing it all. Some of it's in his foundation, some of it's in his stock portfolio. But he's got all this money. He bounces back and forth between the richest publicly acknowledged person. Obviously, he's not really the richest, but at least the ones that the CERNs have to know about. He's probably the richest, if not, one of the richest, if not the richest on the planet. And he is used to getting his way. So he came up with this crazy idea, signed a deal with UNESCO, the UN's global education agency, to come up with global education schemes and global education curricula and training programs for teachers and technological tools. Signed an agreement with UNESCO. This was back in 2004. Phyllis Schlafly of Eagle Forum got a copy of this agreement, posted it online. And sure enough, within a few years, he started working on something called Common Core. Now, if you haven't been living under a rock for the last, say, 10, 12 years, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? Common Core, the dumbed down national standards that Bill Gates and UNESCO were able to get Obama to impose on all 50 of our states. Well, now we have the studies. American children have never been dumber. They're still getting dumber. It's all a direct result of Common Core. And you'd think, well, hey, that was a dumb idea. Somebody ought to hold Bill Gates responsible, and we ought to get crud out of our schools. No, it doesn't work that way, right? The kids must continue being dumbed down with Common Core. And so with all that in the background, you need to understand that when this guy says he wants to vaccinate the entire world with his crazy vaccines, we need to realize that this is not just hot air. This is not just bluffing. This is not just the delusions of a madman. And clearly he seems to be a madman to me. But he obviously is a madman with very very significant resources, who's got the ear of governments all over the world. The establishment has been fawning over him. He's a philanthropist. He loves democracy and all that. Well, as we're going to see, the picture is not quite so nice. So we start off with saying, well, what does Bill Gates actually believe? And if you had to condense it all into a few words, it would be Bill Gates believes there are way too many of us walking around on this planet. He's extremely unhappy with the fact that there's, what, 7 billion people in the world. And if you listen to his speeches, he's just obsessed with reducing that number. Him and his wife have been focusing on overpopulation for many, many years. They've been showering money on abortion groups like Planned Parenthood, right? Hundreds of millions of dollars on contraception. He's even been funding the UN Population Fund, the UNFPA, which, of course, was exposed in the U.S. Congress, working with the mass murdering communist Chinese dictatorship on forced abortions and forced sterilizations to enforce its barbaric population control policies. Now, it seems like Bill Gates got this curious obsession with getting rid of people from his father, Bill Gates Sr. And he actually gave an interview in 2003 on PBS with Bill Moyer, where he said,
when I was growing up, my parents were always involved in various volunteer things. My dad was head of Planned Parenthood, and it was very controversial to be involved with that.
Bill Gates' father was a senior bigwig at Planned Parenthood, the largest abortion group in the world. And of course, back then it was openly promoting eugenics, right? It was founded by Margaret Sanger, who believed that we needed to get human weeds out of the gene pool. She really didn't like black people. She thought, yeah, she would go speak at KKK rallies, and she talked about the need to get these human weeds out of the gene pool through selective breeding and things like that. Now, of course, Planned Parenthood is the biggest force for the mass slaughter of unborn babies in the world. And Bill Gates and his wife absolutely love this. They've been showering money on Planned Parenthood. At a 2017 conference in London, the Global Family Planning Summit, Bill Gates' wife announced almost $400 million for population control efforts, much of which will at least be used indirectly to massacre unborn, preborn babies. And this is what Gates does. And he's been on this for a long time. In 1997, they started pouring money into contraception. And one of the big ones that they backed is called Depo-Provera, a contraceptive. They just flooded the third world with this drug from hell. And it turns out it actually causes and contributes to cervical cancer, breast cancer, sterility, miscarriages, HIV/AIDS, chlamydia, lots of venereal diseases, and other deadly problems. And so Bill Gates said, hey, let's give $2.6 billion for this thing, and let's give 100 million women in Africa this Depo-Provera. And people at the time, black leaders, including black leaders and human rights activists in the United States, said this is a crime of epic proportions. This is genocidal. What in the world is wrong with you? But of course, Bill Gates doesn't care, and he's got more money than you. And so, shush. Take your birth control and quit complaining. He's also a big-time Democrat, right? In 2016, he was giving a bunch of money to a bunch of Democrats in Congress. During the 2012 election, he hosted this huge super fundraiser for Barack Hussein Obama, charging people $13,000 per plate to show up. Isn't that cute? He doesn't like Trump. He does wish that the government had a lot more power. Says that, yeah, it'd be nice if the presidency had more power. And actually, the UK has a pretty nice system. Yeah, that's great. If you like socialism and no God-given rights protected by law, then yeah, that'd probably be pretty nice, right? So this is Bill Gates. He's a, publicly at least, he's a radical Democrat. And his mission in life seems to be to reduce the number of human beings on the planet. And so along comes his vaccination fanaticism. Okay, and you're thinking, that's interesting. Vaccines supposedly are supposed to keep us healthy and keep us alive longer. How does that fit with reducing the population of the planet? Where is all this going? And rather than explain it to you, I think we'll let Bill Gates do the explaining. So Bill Gates gave a TED Talk in 2010. I want you to see what he had to say here.
First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%. But there we see an increase of about 1.3.
All right, guys, did you hear what he said? headed up to about 9 billion people if we do a really good job, really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, and reproductive health services, by which he means, of course, contraception and abortion. We could lower that by 10 or 15%. We're going to lower the number of people by doing a good job with abortions and vaccines. Interesting. That's what he says in public, right? And of course, he has said this kind of thing multiple times. In 2011, he went on the fakest of all the fake news channels, CNN, talking to Mr. Sanjay Gupta, and he said he was hoping for unbelievable progress.
$10 billion over the next 10 years to make it the year of the vaccines. What does that mean exactly?
Well, over this decade, we believe unbelievable progress can be made, both inventing new vaccines and making sure they get out to all the children who need them.
Hoping for unbelievable progress in both inventing new vaccines and making sure they get out to all the children who need them. And he says, we only need about 6 or 7 more, and then you would have all the tools to reduce childhood death, reduce population growth, and everything. The stability, the environment benefits from that. Get it, guys? You reduce the population, everything's better. Gaia is apparently going to be much happier with less people on the planet. Now, apologists for Bill Gates say, oh, no, he doesn't really mean that he's going to kill people and reduce the population with vaccines. What he means is that, you know, if people's babies don't die, then they'll have less babies. And so that's why he talks about vaccines in the context of population control. And in fairness to Bill Gates, he's said something similar. You know, people were like, wait a minute, you want to reduce the population with vaccines? That's kind of crazy. And so he put out this thing. He said, a surprising but critical fact we learned was that reducing the number of deaths actually reduces population growth. Okay. All right, Bill Gates says he wants to use vaccines to reduce population by having less people die. Well, what do his vaccine programs look like in practice? Well, let's take a look. In 2014, Bill Gates was funding an enormous tetanus vaccination program in Kenya, which, by the way, just a few years earlier, the UN Population Fund that Bill Gates also funds said, oh my goodness, there's way too many Africans, especially too many Kenyans. They're all having like 4 babies. Who in the world do they think they are to have all these children? We, the all-wise, all-knowing, benevolent overlords at the United Nations, need to bring those numbers down. And so they came up with, you know, how do we convince brainwashed Kenyan women not to want so many children? And, you know, yeah, and somehow that's not racist, right? Okay, but anyways, they unleashed this so-called vaccination campaign all over Kenya. The World Health Organization and UNICEF, fun fact, they were caught producing child porn in the basement, actually in Belgium, of their headquarters building. Yep. That's what they do. New York Times talked about it, so that was interesting. But anyways, this vaccination campaign in Kenya, the Kenya Catholic Doctors Association got very curious. So they grabbed some samples of these vaccines from all over the country, from these UN agencies funded by Bill Gates, and they sent them to laboratories all over the world. And what they found was that every single one of these vaccines was laced with something called human chorionic gonadotropin, which is a hormone that women's bodies need to carry a pregnancy to term. And what happens is when you inject women with a vaccine that's laced with HCG, their body creates an immune response to this hormone. And so they get pregnant, the body's immune system attacks that hormone, and of course the women become sterile. They're not able to carry the pregnancy to term, their baby dies in the womb, and they have a miscarriage. And so the women who've been taking these vaccines become sterile. Now, you know, one country, okay, maybe we could say maybe there was an accident. But once you start realizing that they did the same thing in Mexico, they did the same thing in Nicaragua, they did the same thing in the Philippines. In fact, the U.S. government and the World Health Organization have known that you can sterilize people this way for many, many years. You realize something very fishy is going on. Now, don't just take the Kenya Catholic Doctors Association's word for it. They said that this proved our worst fears. The spokesman, Dr. Wahome Nagade, said this was a population control mass sterilization exercise, not a tetanus campaign. He said the unfortunate truth is that the vaccine was laced with HCG, just like the one they used in South America. Further, none of the girls and women given the vaccination were informed of its contraceptive effects. So they didn't tell these girls, they didn't tell these women they weren't going to be able to have children after getting their tetanus vaccine. Now, the Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops, every single bishop in Kenya signed a statement telling the people of Kenya, we are convinced that this is a disguised population control program. Do not take these vaccines. And they've been doing it over and over and over again. Now, again, Bill Gates is the primary financier of the World Health Organization now that the U.S. government has rolled back its contributions. Thank you, President Donald Trump. Wonderful move. We'll do a whole episode on the World Health Organization coming soon, by the way. But now Bill Gates is officially the largest financier of the World Health Organization, the largest single financier of the World Health Organization. And so I did some research last year because they actually had the gall to say that vaccine skeptics, people who are a little bit skeptical of vaccines, are one of the top 10 threats to global health. Well, I looked at their training programs that they were using to try to deal with this. And what they do is they actually train doctors and nurses and medical professionals to lie to you, to parents, about vaccines. And so they have these sample questions that these vaccine skeptic parents might have. Can vaccines cause harmful side effects, illness, and even death? One of the sample questions goes. And the World Health Organization trains these professionals to say, no, vaccines are very safe. That is an absolute lie, and they know it. To say that there are no harmful side effects, illness, or even death from vaccines is a blatant 100% total lie. They know it. Everybody knows it. All you got to do is open up the vaccine insert, and they'll tell you there's a risk of serious injury, illness, paralysis, and even death. Okay? Over and over and over again, we see that. We also found out last year from the World Health Organization that most of the polio paralysis around the world today was coming from the Gates-funded polio vaccination campaigns in Africa and Asia. And you don't have to believe me for it. The Associated Press actually published a news article about it, to their credit. Normally fake news, but they did publish this. November 25th, 2019, they said global health numbers show that there are now more children being paralyzed by viruses originating in vaccines than in the wild. That's straight from the World Health Organization. The World Health Organization's independent monitoring board warned about this. They said that this vaccine-derived polio was spreading uncontrollably in West Africa, and they said that the attitude of the World Health Organization and its partners, by which of course they mean the Bill Gates Foundation, was relaxed. Yeah, I'd be relaxed too if I was paralyzing thousands of children all over. Wait, no, I wouldn't, right? That would be insane. These people belong in jail, okay? In India, Bill Gates was also doing his vaccines for all, and the Indian Journal of Medical Ethics published a report noting that Bill Gates' polio vaccination campaigns caused almost 50,000 cases of paralysis in just 1 year in children, almost 500,000 if you look from 2000 to 2017. People got really mad. The case went all the way to the Supreme Court, and Gates's vaccine benevolence is no longer welcome in India. And now Bill Gates is holding the entire world hostage.
Things won't go back to truly normal until we have a vaccine that we've gotten out to basically the entire world.
Are you guys getting this? Bill Gates says we can never get back to normal. We're never having normalcy again until we all take his crazy vaccine. Says we can't go back to the way things were. The most urgent task humanity has ever had is to vaccinate everyone for this coronavirus. Are you guys getting this? Okay. And trust me, Bill Gates is not your friend. He's not doing this because he loves you. This is crazy. Now, how is he going to make sure that all the slaves are getting their vaccine? Well, he's got an answer to that too. Okay, Bill Gates has been thinking about this for a long time, along with his cronies at the Rockefeller Foundation and other places. So Bill Gates told us that the way we're going to track everybody is we're going to have a digital certificate that proves whether you got your vaccine or not. And his little buddy over at the NIH, Anthony Fauci, says the same thing. We got to figure out who has vaccines and who hasn't. That means we have to have digital records, and coronavirus immunity cards is actually how Fauci put it. This is being discussed in the administration. Now, Bill Gates and his buddies have been on this scheme for a long time. They've been funding this thing called the ID 2020, where they want biometric IDs for every person on the planet. These should keep track of their digital identities. It would be from birth to death. You would have all their vaccine records to make sure that every vaccine Bill Gates wants you to have and your children to have has been given. And starting in 2016, Bill Gates and other globalist billionaires started pouring money into research at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. They were coming up with, quote, according to MIT, a novel way to record a patient's vaccination history by storing the data in a pattern of dye invisible to the naked eye that is delivered under the skin at the same time as the vaccine. Okay, are you getting this, guys? This technology, quote, consists of nanocrystals called quantum dots. This tattoo type scheme would remain under the skin where it emits near-infrared light that can be detected by a specially equipped smartphone. If that sounds right for you, report to your nearest Bill Gates vaccination center, and I'm sure they'll be happy to hook you up. Now, there's some really creepy stuff if you really want to go down the rabbit hole. Bill Gates and Microsoft filed a patent for, quote, a cryptocurrency system using body activity data. That's what they said in their patent filing. The number is WO 2020 06, 06, 06. And so a lot of people are like, wait a minute, 2020, 666? That's kind of creepy. Meanwhile, Bill Gates is also funding, and I have the government documents to prove it, research into the use of luciferase and luciferin. These are bioluminescent compounds in medical applications. So if you don't want to get injected with a vaccine made out of dead, aborted babies with luciferase and luciferin and aluminum and all kinds of other stuff, you are a very bad person and we will come get you, right? Fortunately, there's people speaking out about this craziness, but this is craziness. Now, Bill Gates has been preparing for this kind of stuff for a very long time. Some of you guys who watch this show regularly, we've already talked about Event 201 that Bill Gates and his buddies funded over at Johns Hopkins at the Bloomberg School of Public Health. You had the World Economic Forum participating, and we've actually showed clips of that in other ones. And they were preparing last year in October for an outbreak. This is a quote from their scenario: an outbreak of a novel zoonotic coronavirus transmitted from bats to pigs to people that eventually becomes officially transmissible from person to person. This pathogen and disease are modeled largely on SARS, but is more transmissible in the community setting by people with mild symptoms. So if you watch the video of this, you basically had representatives of big government, including from the mass murdering regime in China, by the way. You had representatives of big business, the ones who are going to take you to the cleaners by giving you vaccines and telling you what you need, and of course big pharma, right? And the only time this horrible scenario actually ends is when everybody takes their vaccine, okay? And in the meantime, government has to censor social media. We got to tell the news what to say. We've got to run your life. Now, Gates wasn't the first one to imagine this scenario. A decade earlier, and we've talked about this on this show as well, the Rockefeller Foundation put out a report called Scenarios for the Future of Technology and International Development. One of those lame titles, and they know nobody's ever going to read these stupid reports. Well, they have 4 different scenarios for how we move closer to this crazy new world order that they want. And one of those scenarios was about a future pandemic. They call it lockstep. So go get the report and read this. It'll blow your mind. It's like reading the news today. And what they say is communist China, they did wonderful because they're totalitarian. Stupid America and all these free countries, all of them are going to die because they don't accept tyranny quickly enough. And in this report, they say that citizens will be demanding top-down direction and oversight over nations and economies. We're going to have biometric ID for all citizens, tighter regulation of key industries, a suite of new regulations and agreements, and we need more to restore order and economic growth. Again, if you read this, it sounds just like you're reading the news today with the same crazy ideas, tyranny to fight a virus, right? And then along comes Bill Gates, right? He was on the fakest of all fake news, CNN, with Fareed Zakaria, and they asked him, what about China, right? And Bill Gates says, quote, China did a lot of things right in this pandemic, right? Some countries did respond very quickly, like China, and other countries like the U.S. He said, it's sad that the U.S., you would have expected to do this well, but we did it particularly poorly. Okay, Mr. Totalitarian, right? This is what Bill Gates believes, right? Communist China, good. Tyranny, good. America, freedom. Medical freedom, bad, bad, bad. Now, Bill Gates was also funding the sources of the fear-mongering that produced this hysteria, right? There was 2 main outfits that provided the hysteria that justified all these lockdowns and all these crazy policies. One was the Institute for Health Metrics Evaluation at the University of Washington in Seattle. They were launched with a grant from Bill Gates. Gates has showered hundreds of millions of dollars on this institution. Then the other was the Imperial College of London. They normally specialize in producing climate change propaganda and sustainable development lies, but basically to convince you of the same thing, right? Shut down your economy, give up all your liberties, let the UN run your life. Same deal. So these are both organizations funded by Bill Gates. These are the organizations that said millions of people are going to die if we don't all submit to lockdowns, shutting down the economy, give up all your freedom, shut up, no more church for you, and all the rest, right? Both of these institutes funded by Bill Gates. And now they've walked back their stupid predictions. All right, fine, millions of people are going to die. All right, fine, probably hundreds of thousands aren't even going to die. But still, we have the totalitarianism in place. So I want to spend a few minutes here talking about Bill Gates' background and associations. Bill Gates is a really shady guy. He's got lots of ties to the elite, not just in the United States, but also in communist China. It's amazing how all these globalist elites, Rockefeller, Kissinger, Bloomberg, Gates, pick your totalitarian billionaire, they're all very close to the mass murdering regime in China. So actually in 2017, Bill Gates was inducted into the prestigious Chinese Academy of Engineering. Now this is according to Communist Chinese propaganda, one of the country's top academic institutions. It is also part of the State Council of the People's Republic of China, which is the regime's main executive ruling body. It's headed by Communist Chinese Premier Li Keqiang, and just like in Nazi Germany, all organs of state power and even non-official organs of state power, like the Chinese Academy of Engineering, are expected to serve the party state forever, always, loyally. And so just recently, amid the coronavirus craziness, Gates wrote a letter to the mass-murdering dictator of China, Xi Jinping. And, communist Chinese propaganda outlets just loved it. They were so proud. And Gates bragged that his foundation committed up to $100 million in emergency funding, much of which will help China bolster epidemiological research, emergency intervention, and the research and development of drugs, vaccines, and diagnostics. The mass-murdering dictator responded. He said, I support your cooperation with relevant Chinese institutions and look forward to enhanced coordination and concerted efforts in the international community for the sake of health and well-being of all. Now, if you don't think Communist Chinese dictator Xi Jinping has the the well-being of all in mind, then you must be some kind of crazy conspiracy theorist. Everybody knows that mass-murdering communist dictators have the well-being of all at the forefront of their thinking all day, every day, right? Bill Gates has got his own troubling associations here in America. He was connected closely to the pedophile Jeff Epstein. He actually even flew on Jeff Epstein's private jets, and I'm sure you've heard about what happens on those private jets. He used to go to Epstein's homes, and lots of stuff like that. And this was even after the pedophile was convicted of hiring child prostitutes and raping children, okay? He was a registered sex offender, and who doesn't want to be connected with a child raping registered sex offender, right? So Gates would go to his mansion, Gates's employees would go to his mansion. Gates's former science advisor, Boris Nikolic, was actually the backup executor for Epstein's will, and that would be interesting to learn more about. Gates is not technically a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Epstein was, fun fact, he was part of the president's circle. But Microsoft Corporation is a corporate member of the CFR. In 2003, the Gates Foundation gave the Council on Foreign Relations big bucks to create a senior fellowship in global health and foreign policy. Then, a few years later, the Barack Hussein Obama administration took all these crazy ideas that were developed by this lunatic, and they launched the Global Health Initiative, where they said $63 billion they were going to steal from the American people were going to be showered on third world dictators and contraception schemes to improve global health. And if you don't think these guys want to improve global health, then, man, I can't help you. I mean, obviously, it's so benevolent, right? And just to give you some idea, Hillary Clinton, of course, said the CFR tells her what she should be doing and how she should be thinking about the future. We've showed that video before, and she's right? Bill Gates put up money for the CFR. CFR advanced his agenda. Obama adopted it, and presto, right? Bill Gates has also written for the CFR's Mouthpiece Foreign Affairs about gene editing technology. He thinks that's really important. Gates' wife gave a speech to the Council on Foreign Relations and praised them for the indispensable work they do. Apparently, it benefits every American, and isn't that nice? Now, if you don't know about the CFR, it's like deep state headquarters in the United States. Make sure you go check out our video on that. We'll post it here so that you can check it out. Very important. Gates has also been a regular guest at the Bilderberg meetings, right? 120 to 150 of the most powerful men in the world. They bring together some useful idiots to see if they might be even more useful. They recruit people to maybe run for president, run for prime minister. We've done a lot on Bilderberg. We've done a whole episode of the show on Bilderberg. Go back and watch it. Now, Gates sometimes isn't even listed on the official attendee list, but he still shows up, right? Sneaks in the back door. And there's some real questions about the Logan Act, right? Americans are not allowed to go negotiate with foreign governments unless they have specific authorization to do so. And as far as I know, Gates has not received any specific authorization. Now, Gates is also involved in a secret cabal of globalist population control fanatic billionaires called the Good Club. And it's kind of like the Patriot Act, right? When they say it's patriotic, you can be pretty sure it's the opposite of patriotic. So in 2009, Times of London talked about this group. They said that their goal was to reduce the population of the world. Bill Gates and David Rockefeller, who now passed away, and I can't imagine that went well. But he boasted in his memoirs, of course, of conspiring against the interests of his own country with a secret cabal to create a more integrated global political and economic structure, one world, if you will. That's David Rockefeller in his own memoir. So Bill Gates, David Rockefeller come together, too many people on the planet. How are we going to get rid of you guys? And, another one of the guys who's been close to David Rockefeller for decades is Henry Kissinger. Go back and read National Security Memorandum 200. Henry Kissinger viewed overpopulation as a national security issue and thought that the policy of the United States government should be to depopulate the third world. Okay. If you live in Africa, if you live in Latin America, if you live in Asia, they're targeting you. Okay. Other members of this crazy good club include Warren Buffett, George Soros, Michael Bloomberg, Ted Turner, right? The guy who is said to have put up those crazy statues in Georgia calling for the population of humanity to be reduced to 500 million for selective breeding, right? These guys are eugenicists and they're insane. And isn't it interesting how they all seem to love the mass murdering dictator of China, and they all seem to be victims of Trump derangement syndrome, okay? Crazy, crazy stuff. So on the bright side, guys, I know it's a lot of bad news to take in, but on the bright side, Americans are waking up, right? I can't tell you how many people I've talked to. We've talked about this forced vaccine issue, and I still don't know anybody who's going to take it. So I think Bill Gates is going to have a very difficult time trying to get everybody to inject this. My guess is they'll probably try to make it so that you stay in lockdown unless and until you take your vaccine. They might not get away with it this time, but they'll be back. They are always coming back, right? Now we have a petition on the White House. 500,000 people have signed it already, and it's not even at the deadline yet. They want Bill Gates investigated for medical malpractice and crimes against humanity. They say, as we look at the events surrounding COVID-19 pandemic, various questions remain unanswered. Only weeks prior to Ground Zero being declared in Wuhan, two major events took place. One event 201. The other is Military World Games held in Wuhan. Since then, a worldwide push for vaccines and biometric tracking has been initiated. At the forefront of this is our boy Bill Gates. He has publicly stated his interest in reducing population growth by 10 or 15% by using vaccines. Okay. Gates, UNICEF, and World Health Organization have already been credibly accused of intentionally sterilizing Kenyan children through the use of a hidden HCG antigen in tetanus vaccines. Congress and all other governing bodies are derelict in their duty until a thorough and public inquiry is completed. Now, obviously, guys, if you've been watching this show, you know Bill Gates is not the top of the pyramid, right? He's a front man for the evil forces that are doing this. They're not good. They are actually quite evil. And, I would recommend reading your Bible in these times. It'll be helpful and useful to you. But we need to expose these people, right? Bill Gates is already telling us, he actually put out this 11-page memo that no one who lives through pandemic 1 will ever forget it, right? He's talking about this one as pandemic 1. They are planning for a pandemic 2 and a pandemic 3. And if we're not careful, guys, we're going to end up losing our freedom, losing our liberties, and potentially being forced to take these dangerous, kooky vaccines. Bill Gates needs to be exposed. He needs to be stopped. He's welcome to use his billions of dollars on any kind of crazy thing he wants to, but not on hijacking my government, not on stealing my liberties, not on forcing me or anyone I love to take crazy vaccines that are untested, and not on hijacking the United Nations for global control. So that's all I have, folks, for you. This is going to be a major investigative piece appearing in the New American Magazine for print subscribers very soon. This is what our print magazine looks like. We've been talking about Bill Gates for a long time. This is one we did on the Deep State. It's called The Deep State Pulling Strings Behind the Scenes. We've got an article here on the Deep State's money men. We got David Rockefeller. We got George Soros. We got all these criminals. And we got the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, obviously. So these are dangerous folks, guys, and they control the internet, right? Bill Gates and his buddies in Silicon Valley. They don't want you to see this, and they don't want anybody else to see this. So make sure you like, share, subscribe. Go over to our website, thenewamerican.com. Subscribe to the print magazine. Get signed up for our daily headlines. Those are free. You'll get the real news right in your inbox, and there's nothing Bill Gates and the tech billionaires can do to stop it. God bless you all. Thank you so much for watching, and stay safe.